Oh my gosh, we're live. Excellent. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back. I'm pretty thrilled that this On the Schmooze live has continued to be a thing after 300 plus episodes of hosting a podcast. It's kind of bringing some new verve into this. I don't know. It's exciting in a different way. And so, in a moment, I'm going to introduce today's guest, but I'm thrilled that you're here, replay viewers. And please watch the end and share it. So, today's guest. Today's guest can help you network your way to more friends, more adventures, and way more success. She knows two key things: the people you meet will change your life, and networking is how you meet those people. She's a motivating, high energy speaker, teaching the importance of networking and why you are your best business development tool. She's the author of This Shit Works, a no nonsense guide to networking your way to more friends, more adventures, and more success, a book dedicated to making networking easy, accessible, and fun, as well as the host of This Shit Works, a podcast dedicated to all things business development. Please join me in welcoming Julie Brown. Hey, Julie.
Hello, I'm so excited to be here.
Julie, you're hanging out in my old hometown, my previous hometown of Boston,
Yes.
Massachusetts.
Yep.
Pretty awesome. Sorry we didn't make all this happen while I was still living there.
Yeah,
But
it
now
is
you're
cool here
here.
today.
It's a show about building strong networks, and the context is leadership. So tell me, how do you define leadership, and when did you realize you had the skills to lead?
Well, I think if you Googled leadership, you'd probably get a myriad of different ways to define leadership. And so I think it's probably up to each person to define what a leader is to them. But I think, you know, anybody can be a leader. And it doesn't have anything to do with your title or how many years you have of experience. It's, you can be a leader in everyday and little everyday scenarios. So
Mhm.
every day, are you influencing others? Are you helping others? Are you empowering others? Are you taking risks? Like, that's how I think about leaders, not so much as, oh, I lead this team. Because what if you're an ineffective leader? Are you really a leader then? So I think there's a lot of, I mean, we could go in a lot of different ways with this idea of leadership.
I like that you said taking risks as part of it, not just influencing and impacting, but taking risks, because that kind of also says you're a little bit up front ahead of
Mm,
maybe where other people are taking that risk, putting yourself out there. Maybe it's making a suggestion,
right.
right? Maybe it's pointing out an error. There's all these studies. Like I'm just thinking, I was just rereading the studies from NASA around what they've done to make it safer for people to speak up. And the people
Mm,
who speak up, they're leaders, right? Like taking
right.
on the onus of speaking their mind. So I love how you're expanding. I've been doing this for a while now, so it's always great to me when I have someone say something that's a little different from what
Mm.
I've heard. So at what point in your life did you start to realize you had some of these skill sets?
Well, I think when you are a solopreneur, when you're an entrepreneur, you have absolutely no choice but to be the leader of your firm, of your brand, of your business. So I probably discovered it a little bit before I decided to quit my job and start my own company. And I think at that point, I kept saying to myself, I, this is going to sound so, maybe bad, but I was like, I'm really good at this. Like, why am I not doing this for myself? It was more of, I realized that I could teach other people how to do what I do. And when I realized that I could teach more people how to do what I do, then I saw myself as a leader.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that's when it
I
happened.
I think you're right. There, you kind of have no choice when you're doing all the work, and all the roles kind of fall on you,
Yeah.
including leader, including bottle washer,
Yeah.
all the
Exactly.
roles.
Yeah.
But all right, let's wind the clock back a little bit, because I'm always curious how people sort of came to be who they are today. But let's start with who you had been. What kind of kid were you in the playground?
Oh,
Did you run for office when you were in high school? Did teachers see potential in you? Were you
no,
quiet? Were you outgoing? Like, what kind of kid were you?
people saw no potential in me. I was the girl that talked too much. I was too loud. I was the one who was always shushed. I mean, just to paint a picture here, I thought I was going to grow up to be a part of the Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling. Like, I was obsessed with the WWF when I was a little kid. I was the only girl in the fifth grade who wore a Hulkamania t shirt to school. I was obsessed. I went to go see, like, I had a family friend who was also into the WWF, and he would take me. The Lowell Arena is where we live, is the big arena. He would take me to WWF matches there when I was a little kid. Like, that's who I was. I was always over the top. And in school, in parochial settings, that's not exactly embraced. So I was always the one I got a note every time I went home that I was talking too much or I wasn't paying attention and all that. That's who I was as a kid.
That's amazing. I mean, you're bringing up Glow, the Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling. I just recently watched the show. It was pretty amazing.
So good.
So good. So, I mean, yeah, that is a way you channel the "I'm already over the top. I must get paid for it." You're like, yeah, there are people who are over the top and who are appreciated. I want to be one of those people. I don't want to be shush.
Yeah.
Yeah, but does that mean that at 12 that was the aspiration? Like, go and get into this WWF stuff?
Okay, so this is where the two sides of Julie come. Like, knew I was either going to be in Glow or, and this never happened, I was going to be a lawyer, because those gave me two platforms where, okay, so in the Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling, you can never be too much. You can be accused of being too little. Not big enough, not bold enough, not hairsprayed enough, not neoned enough. Like, you could be not enough. And then I was like, well, if I'm not going to make it into Glow, then I'm just going to be a lawyer, because then everybody has to listen to me. I have closing arguments and I can say what I want.
All right. So you wanted to be seen and heard and respected.
Yes.
You didn't have a strong preference of the medium, but
No.
you knew the values that you had.
Yeah. And I don't think I knew professional speaker was on the table. So I went
Right. That wasn't even an option.
for to have a platform.
Was college a given in your family? Was there like your course you're going to graduate and go to college? Was that just sort of part of the
Um,
path?
I don't think historically that was a given to the people in my family before me, but but I was, even though I was crazy and too loud, I was always a straight A student. I was definitely going to get out of the town that I grew up in. So historically, it wasn't like everybody in my family went to college, but when it came to me, I was certainly going to college.
And you were gonna go to college to do what? Was there a very specific career
Very
plan? But by the
specific.
time 17, 18 comes along, are you like, are you narrowed down your options between
Nothing makes
lawyer and
sense here.
glow?
Nothing makes sense. I went to college and got a degree in pre-med biology. And I think again, nothing makes nothing makes sense, which I did absolutely nothing with. And halfway through getting that degree, I said, I absolutely hate this. I never want to do this anymore. I don't know why I signed up for this. And I took on a business minor. And so when I graduated with the degree in biology, but also with a business minor. And then I was like, okay, now what do I do with this? And then obviously went more the business route than anything else. So
Yeah, it's really interesting. A lot of people I know who did pre-med did things like theater that, were a little easier grades than biology even. So clearly you had good grades, you were a good student,
yep.
but you weren't so motivated by the topic anymore. You started getting into business. Was there a specific piece of business like early on? I mean, were there people, entrepreneurship wasn't really on the table at that
Right.
point. What you had all these skills, but like how did you channel them as you
Yeah,
graduated from college?
I was like a jack of all trades and a master of nothing, to be honest, when I graduated. And I was moving into Boston and I moved here without a job. I just, this is pre like I went on this website. This is going to sound so bad. I went on this website called easyroommate.com. Like, that's how you found a roommate back in the like late 90s, and found a roommate, moved to Boston, had no job. And suddenly I was like, I have to pay rent. So I started temping. So I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I didn't know what I wanted to do with this degree that I wanted nothing to do with. So I started temping. What happened was I ended up getting a job as administrative assistant at an architecture firm, and ended up actually loving the built world and loving architecture, and ended up spending, I have now, prior to starting my own company in 2016, spent 18 years in the architecture industry, married an architect, started his practice with him. We've owned that practice for 12 years now. Like, I ended up falling in love with the built world, but I still did business. I did business development and client relations within architecture, engineering, and construction firms in Boston, which that is a really, really big industry in Boston. And just fell in love with the people I met in the whole process and changing landscapes and cities and campuses. And so none of it makes sense, but it all makes sense.
Yeah. I was it anything in particular with the built world? Because I've thought a lot about, how we, use space that's usable versus accessible and
Yeah.
commons and how we bring people together. And I can see how that might relate to your like relationship focused brain.
I mean, for me, I think it was all about how do we design spaces in which people live and make those spaces also really, really beautiful and pleasing to the eye and more artwork that more art. I know you're supposed to have form over function, but like artwork to the buildings as well. So very interesting. And what's funny about this whole thing is people always assume I've been with my husband for 21 years. People always assume that I met my husband in the industry, and I totally didn't. I met him drunk in a bar, and it just so happened to be that he was an architect.
Amazing. I
Yep,
definitely was assuming that
yep.
you 2 had
Everybody
met at some
assumes.
industry event or something.
Yes, and as
Um,
you can imagine, my husband being a classical architect, or, classically trained architect, he lends towards the introverted side of the ambivert spectrum, and I obviously lend towards the extroverted side of the ambivert spectrum, and we were in the industry for years, sharing the same last name. I've had the last name. We've been married for 18 or 19 years. I don't know. I should know. Um, People didn't connect us. Like Brown's a pretty
right,
popular name,
right.
but it was years before people were like, "Wait a
Wait a minute.
minute,
You
you
2.
guys are married?" Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, they couldn't see it because they didn't see you 2 together.
right.
Amazing. So those are great skills though you built up. I mean, to stay in one industry for a long
Yes.
time, to
Yep.
develop business development skills, develop the skill of sort of, just like, I mean, obviously even being an administrative assistant and knowing how to run a business, doing
Mhm.
all that. I think a lot of people who go into entrepreneurship actually don't have a lot of experience in the business side of having a business.
Well,
It
I
seems
started
like you had both. You
I
had
worked my
developed a
way up.
skill and you had developed the, like,
Yeah.
I don't know, the
I did
overhead.
everything. So I started as administrative assistant, and then I became a marketing assistant, and then became a marketing manager, and then a business development assistant, and then straight 100% business development relationship building. So I literally did everything on my journey to becoming an entrepreneur.
So you said in 2016 is when you put a flag in for
Yep.
yourself and went full time into entrepreneurship. Was there a precipitating factor? Was there something that said, "This is the moment for me"?
Yep. So there was a couple of things. There was a couple of things. So I had helped my husband launch his practice in 2010. And to be honest, I was 100% jealous of his entrepreneurial lifestyle. He made his hour. Now, again, we all know when you're an entrepreneur, you work more hours than you did before you were an entrepreneur, but you work when you want to work. So I was jealous of him, having this flexibility with his schedule. I was, just jealous that he had done it, that he had something with his name on it, and he was making money for himself and not for someone else. And so I watched him do that for 6 years before I said, I'm doing this. I'm
Mhm.
100% doing this. And so that was one of the factors. Another factor is that I had been replaced in a job by some, again, this is my opinion, my humble opinion, but by somebody who was not as good at the job as I was. And people in it caused this huge ruckus in the industry, and people were like, "Oh, if it can happen to Julie, it can happen to all of us." And all of us were a little bit shook over it. And I remember saying at that point, this will never happen to me again. I will never be replaced again. And so that also combined with seeing him, I was like, how do I not get replaced? And I was like, I'll just start my own business and I'll have my own clients and I'll pick who I want to work with. And I'll tell you something, Robbie, during the when March 2020, when everything was hitting the fan, and a lot of my friends that were business development directors were getting laid off, I had this I had this overwhelming sense of peace that that wasn't going to happen to me, that I was controlling what happened with my company, and no one was deciding whether or not I had a job or not.
Hmm.
And so that was very interesting. It kind of came full circle for me during the pandemic.
It's interesting because there's a lot of ways in which people think of day jobs, 9 to 5 jobs as being secure and
Mhm.
stable and safe and until there's a layoff, until there's a
Yeah,
merger, until
yeah,
there's a down economy or a recession or something happens in the stock market and suddenly roles that felt incredibly secure are no longer. I was working organizing fundraising events and feeling like I had a very secure role in a nonprofit because, I brought money in,
right,
like I'd been
right,
there for a very long time and I brought money in. So like but then a pandemic came, right? And so, of course, people in those kinds of roles, not everyone was needed and things were changing. So I actually left that role before the pandemic, but it did make me think nothing is secure and
right.
having your own name on the door, while sometimes a wild roller coaster ride is your ride,
Yep.
it is your ride. Now, you and I share a passion for networking
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and relationships, and I had a hard time figuring out at first how to market that as something people would buy.
interesting.
So now
Okay.
you came into this already as business development being the angle,
Mhm.
and when you first went into, full-time entrepreneurship, what was the product or service that you were first putting out, and who was it for?
Yep. So when I decided to go out on my own, so I had spent at that point 17 years doing business development for some of the largest architecture and engineering and construction firms in Boston. So I had a niche, and I was very, very well known in that niche as one of the best, if not the best, BD people in the industry. So what I did before I went out on my own was I started having meetings with people that didn't have business development directors in their office, telling them, I'm going to go out on my own. I'm going to have a handful of non competing clients. Is this something you'd be interested in? Would you be interested in working with me? And I had a handful of meetings, and then I had a handful of clients before I even incorporated my business. So everybody signed on with me before I started my business. This is when it got tricky because then I had all of my clients, which I loved, and then I started getting asked to talk if I would talk about networking and business development because now I was seen as an expert because you go out on your own, you have a handful of clients, now you're seen as an expert. So I was getting asked over and over again by companies if I would come in and do workshops to teach them how I had done what I had done, how I had networked into a pipeline of work, not just for my own company, but for the companies prior to. And that's when I was like, "Oh, huh, I really like doing this part of the company." And so in the almost 7 years since I've had the company, it has now evolved from a consultancy firm into almost 100% professional speaking, talking about networking and business development. And as you know, because you've written a couple of books, I wrote a book about networking, so did you. That helps with the social proof, that helps with you getting booked more, and then also similar to you, having a podcast. Again, continually disseminating information on the subject that is our subject of choice really keeps you in front of the public eye and helps feed the machine that is now your business, which is public speaking and being in front of people.
When you made this switch into entrepreneurship, did you already have entrepreneurs in your circle? Like, did you already know that ecosystem?
Well, I had watched my husband do it for at that point, I'd watched him do it for 6 years. So, yes, I had watched him do it. I am named after my Aunt Julie, who is my mom's sister, who also was an entrepreneur. She owned her own marketing, she did marketing like before the internet. So it was like print marketing, newsletter marketing, advertising. She owned her own advertising agency. And I grew up kind of in the shadow of knowing what she was doing. Eventually, that company was bought by a website company, a development company, and they went into website development and did a couple of other things. And she had a couple of other companies that she sold. So I had seen her do it as a female, as a female entrepreneur, and then I had also watched my husband do it. So I had two very different examples, but yeah, they were definitely in my orbit, and I had both of them to ask questions. And I still probably once a week, I'm like, what would you do in this scenario? So it's great to have that.
She sounds incredible,
She is, yeah,
particularly her generation, being a woman, being a business owner, in a probably more male-dominated ad agency market.
yep,
That's a pretty incredible thing to have done and to have sold,
yes.
more than one business as well, which even today people find very difficult.
Mhm.
So those are great inspirations. And then, of course, you stumbled upon sort of speaking as a passion. At what point did you start to connect with the world of professional speakers and recognize that that was a revenue stream, not just like a nice thing to do or, raise
Um,
visibility, but like this was actually a big part of how you were going to earn your keep?
so, and I think you would probably guide people towards understanding what a peer group can do for you. So when I started speaking, and then I remember as an entrepreneur, I had a month where I was making more money with speaking fees than I was with recurring revenue fees from my consultancy practice. And I said, wait a minute. I should really look at this more seriously. And that's when I discovered the National Speakers Association. And I hate to sound, like I didn't know what I was doing, but I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea that this even existed and that there were so many people that I could tap into and relationships that I could make. And so I joined the National Speakers Association as a professional member because at that point I was making enough money per year to qualify as a professional member. And then also joined my local chapter. And that's when I really started understanding this could be something that I could let go of the consultancy part of my practice if I really worked on this part that I really love and really lights the fire within me. So it was 100% having that peer group, going to the conferences, seeing people at the top of their craft do it and saying, I want to do that. How do I do that? That really allowed me mentally and emotionally to make the shift because you start a company and you think you have to stick with it, but you don't have to stick with it. It can evolve and change, and it can change really rapidly, and that's okay.
Boy, if that wasn't the case, I don't know where I'd be. My
Yeah.
business changed so much since I started. So, I definitely want to mention the National Speakers Association. It's an incredible resource. What year was it that you joined them?
Oh, it must have been about it was the year before the pandemic. So I'm saying it's probably
Mm,
2019 that I
yeah.
joined. Yeah.
So you'd had your own business for a couple of years. Speaking had become a bigger and bigger part of it.
Yeah.
How did you first get introduced to the National Speakers Association? Did someone in particular introduce you?
I Googled it. Like, I Googled
Yeah.
speaker peer group or something to that effect.
Yeah, yeah. So
And
that's resourceful too, right?
yeah, I'm very into the Google machine.
Yeah,
And then I started connecting with people locally that were part of the Speakers Association. And I was told, oh, if you, and I remember this advice, they told me, if you really want to get serious about speaking, you have to go to the conferences. That's where you when you invest to do those things to learn, that's when you are a serious speaker. So then the pandemic happened. And I
mhm,
didn't do the virtual one because I was like, if I'm going to go in, I'm going to go all in. I'm going to go in and meet people. And so I went, my first one was Vegas, which was 2021.
mhm.
Um, and then I went to Nashville this year, which is where we met for the first time in person, even though we
Yeah,
had been back and forth over texting and emails.
yeah.
So it was I didn't jump in with both feet as fast as I should have. I kinda dipped a toe in and then dipped another toe in, and then somebody was like, "No, if you're gonna be into it, you gotta jump all in," and that's when I jumped in 2021.
I left my, world of nonprofits, and in particular organizing fundraising events as being a major gift, helping people with their major gifts, giving, and, the end of 2014, and I joined National Speaker Association in 2015, and they have like an aspiring speaker
Mhm.
sort of membership. And at the end of that year, I remember sitting in a chapter meeting and doing some math on a napkin and realizing that I'd already hit
Yeah,
the whatever the minimum was.
yeah.
And I was like, oh, like this is
Pivotal moment.
happening.
Yeah, that's a
Um,
pivotal moment that because I didn't even know what it was, and I was like, "Oh, what is it?" I didn't know you could be an affiliate member without being a
yeah, the
member.
affiliate member, right?
Oh, I don't know if they'll take me. And then I did the same thing. I was like, okay, I guess you got to take me now.
Well, so, and I think some folks, probably have heard of Toastmasters, and Toastmasters, which has chapters literally globally, they really are about helping people with the craft of speaking, where NSA is the business of
Yes.
speaking.
Yep.
And I think there's a lot to learn about the business of being a
Oh,
professional speaker.
100%.
And that's where these peer connections were really so helpful for
Yep.
you. And I actually started going to the national conference in 2015 and said I was going to go 10 years in a row, get as involved as I could, and then decide whether it was worth it. This is sort of like be all in. You like you
Yep.
said, just jump in. So what were some of the bigger challenges? You know, you had to sort of find some skills you had, some skills you needed
Yeah.
when you were making these shifts, both in the 2016, the beginning, and as things were shifting in 2019, and then of course the pandemic. What were the challenges you were facing, and how did you have to tap into your network to help you?
Well, so a couple of different things. The personal challenges as far as getting on a stage and speaking in front of a stage, in front of people on a stage, there was the challenge of, I think everybody who takes on a role of speaking might say, "Who am I to deliver this message?" And I said that to myself a lot. Who am I to deliver this message? Why are people going to come and see me? Like, no one knows who I am, especially when you're first starting out. So that was certainly like a personal challenge to get over, that I do have a message. I can deliver it in a way that is engaging and thoughtful and will change people's careers. So that was one thing to get over. The second thing was the actual skill of speaking. So from my very first speech that I ever gave, I had it professionally videographed, which is a horrible gut wrenching experience to watch. And I did it over. I'm lucky enough that I've person in my network who owns a videography company, and she's one of my best friends, and she gives me the friends and family rate. But I had all of my first speeches recorded, and I would watch them back and cringe, but write down notes about what I didn't like about what I was doing, where I wasn't giving the audience enough time to like take in what. There was no pauses. It was like brr, like word salad for like an hour, like learning about the power of the pause and humor and all that. So that was another thing that I had to get over. And I think it's just confidence comes with repetition and competence. I was competent. I knew it. I just didn't have the repetition. And so I think just nothing makes you a better speaker than speaking. So,
Yeah, get on more stages. That's the advice always has been that I've heard. You know, I often say, don't judge me on my first 3 attempts, judge me on my last 3 attempts.
yeah. Yeah.
Because I actually just put a little welcome video on my YouTube channel, and it says, "Hey, if you're digging around, I'm sorry, you're probably gonna find some really cringeworthy videos in here. I've been doing this for more than a decade, and if you
I
dig deep
love it.
enough, sorry about that, but my
Yes.
heart was in the right place, and I kept going, and
I
now it's
love
a lot better."
it. Yeah,
But
I
I'm not taking those down because we all started somewhere,
Yeah, and
and
I think you have to, it's good to do that, because I still have those first videos, those videos where I was like, "Ooh." And she does mostly work with politicians. She is a speech coach for politicians, but she would walk me through the videos and she was like, "This is where you really suck." But then I just gave this huge keynote in California 2 weeks ago to 1,000 people, and I had that professionally videographed, and I put them side by side. And it hasn't been that long. It's only been a few years. And the difference between this woman who gave this speech and this woman who gave this speech was just repetition and the confidence in being able to deliver that message and doing it over and over. I've given hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of speeches. That's the only way to get good.
I also really think though that your willingness to look at the tape
Mhm.
and examine what you did
Yeah.
and take notes. I think, a lot of us don't even like seeing ourselves
Yeah.
on
Oh
tape
no, it's
or
horrible.
hearing ourselves, on audio. And
Yeah.
so, but to take note of that and to take in that feedback, I just did a big presentation for the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers, and I was developing slides. I don't usually speak with slides. I'm
Mhm.
much more like interview me. I'll talk about anything.
Right.
But I was like, this is gonna have slides, and so I create all these slides. And I last minute Friday night asked my community. I host a content connection club, so I asked my members, "Hey, I'm gonna just run through this, and I want your feedback." And they gave me such great feedback. I took away 10 minutes of content.
Oh,
I put in slides to tell people kind of where we were in the content. I learned to pause. It's just
mhm.
again, I've been doing this a long time. I'm very comfortable speaking, but when it's new and it's a heightened sort of, you know, experience, like it's caps. I want to do a good job in front of my peers. It's like
Yeah.
I got a compliment from someone on LinkedIn who is not just a CAPS member, but she's a presentation skills expert. And I was like, wow, thank you.
Yeah. That's
Thank you
great.
for telling me that. It's like I've been at this for a while, but like it's still very nice to hear that. But
Yeah.
that effort to always get a little bit better, like even now, right? We don't want to just be like, we're done. It's like
Right.
you just keep crafting. I think that continuous improvement is a part of who you are. And that shows in everything you've done. It feels like probably how you got really good at business development to begin with
Right.
was that you were examining what you did and how you got people to
Oh, yeah.
pipelines, right?
Mhm.
So a lot of build and reflect sort of built in.
Yeah.
So anyone listening, that's right there, takeaway.
The thing is you can't learn from your mistakes if you don't make any. Like, we're all gonna make mistakes. You can't learn from them if you don't make them. So it's okay. Be okay with making mistakes. It's part of the process.
I would love to hear more specifics around, you got sort of that your network, right? You got that inner circle of that network, people that whether you talk to them on a regular basis or not, you're going to pick up with them real easily when you do.
Mhm.
They've got your back.
Yeah.
And then I always think that there's sort of a second and third tier or second
Oh,
and
yeah.
third layer.
Mhm.
And these are the people you might see once a year at a conference, or you worked with them 5 years ago, but you haven't had a reason to since. But you like each other. That
Yeah.
I should mention that you enjoy each other's company. How do you think about nurturing and sustaining those kinds of, I guess I'll call them weaker connections? A little hat tip there. But is it like other habits or philosophies or practices that you do to make
Yeah.
that happen?
So the first thing you're exactly right. There's layers to our network. The top 5 the people that are closest to us, then 15 and 50 and 100 and further out. And none of those relationships are always going to be at the same level. To have your top 5 be your top 100 where you're spending that much time with that many people. We don't have the time, neither does everybody else. So I think what we have to first do is be okay with the fact that our network is built up of a lot of relationships that are in various stages of strength. And that's how it's supposed to be. And some
Mhm.
people that you are close with now, things in your life are going to change, and they're going to change, and you're not going to be as close, and then they're going to come back in, and other people who aren't as close are going to come in and be close for a while and back up. Like, it's a fluid system, and that's the way it's supposed to be. And there's been a lot of research into, let's call it like the circle of 100, those people out there that, like you said, that you see at a conference every year, or maybe you only talk to them every couple of years. Did a study a number of years ago called The Power of Weak Ties, and about how important these relationships that we tend to think of as weaker, how important those relationships really are. We know that we're facing a potential recession coming up. We also know 85% of jobs are filled through networking. What people don't understand is, of those 85% of jobs, 72% of those jobs will be filled from this outer circle of 100. Because what happens is somebody's like, "Oh, we're trying to fill this position," or somebody says, I just lost my job. Do you know anybody who's looking?" What they do is they go back and, like, the way back, and they're like, "Oh my God, let me think." And it's usually from that circle of 100 where you get your most valuable connections as far as going into the next part of your career. Also, like, it's okay for you to have not talked to somebody for a while if you have the kind of relationships where you can just pick up where you started. And so that's understanding that there are some relationships in your network, they need you more than other relationships. They need that constant connection more than other relationships. Identifying that and knowing which ones you can give space and which ones you have to work on more. Khalil Gibran has this great quote called, "There needs to be space in your togetherness." And there are some people where that's how it works for them. They're good with only a little bit of interaction with you, but your network is just as strong. My One of my best friends that I met through networking when she lived in Boston now lives in Chicago. I see her every 3 years, maybe in person, but when we get together, no time has passed. So you have to understand that there are those relationships like that as well. Your
Yeah.
job is to treat everybody with kindness and respect and be invested in other people's success in your relationship, not just looking for what am I getting, what am I getting? Um, and those relationships will do the work for you.
So what are your specific strategies, habits, practices? Like, is there something you're doing daily, weekly,
Yeah.
monthly? Are you tracking things?
Well,
Like, how are you doing this?
this is where I think, number one, I think having a system to be able to communicate with your people, with your network on a consistent basis. So for me, I have the podcast that comes out every Wednesday. I also have a newsletter that comes out every Wednesday that is a really personal newsletter. It is what is happening in my life because my life is networking, it is relationships, it's what's happening with my business. So if you're part of my newsletter group, you're going to hear about my friggin' hip bursitis. Like you're going to hear, and I'm going to somehow make it connected to networking. If you know what I mean. Like you're going to hear about my personal life. And then on LinkedIn, pardon, on LinkedIn, I put my podcast on LinkedIn. I put my newsletter on LinkedIn. I comment on other people's things on LinkedIn. I put in, up other information on LinkedIn. I am constantly in front of my network from a branding and content standpoint. And that is really important because this is what happens. I go to a networking event. I run into a gentleman who I have not seen in 4 years. And what he says to me is, I see you everywhere. Oh my God, I love your stories. I love staying in touch with you. But I'm just doing it like so because my network is so big and so vast. There's no way I could talk to all of those people all the time. So that's one way of doing it, having really good content, not content for content's sake, because nobody wants that. They always say, "Oh, American, the average human has a 7-second attention span or whatever." That's not true. How many of you are binge watching stuff on TV for hours? Your attention span is there if the content is good. Okay. So if people aren't reading your stuff, it's because your content isn't good. Work on your content development. The second thing I do is I make sure that I have a business development checklist by my desk every day, every week. And it is how many face to faces have I had? So something like this, how many face Zooms that I have face to face or coffees do I have face to face? How many events did I go to for the possibility of meeting new people? Then it's how many follow-ups have I done, sending follow-up emails? How many phone calls have I made? So I try to make 3 phone calls a week to somebody in my network, like the old-fashioned ringety ring phone call, because like people love that. They're like, "Oh my God, my phone is ringing." Even if they don't answer. I'm like, "I was thinking of you." These are the 5 magic words. I've been thinking about you. So I was thinking about you. I had some time in the car, blah, blah, blah. Like people love that. So 3 new people every week out of the 400 people in my network. And then also, how many thank you cards have I sent this week? And so I strive to send 2 thank you cards. Oh, this is funny. I just did this. I didn't know we were going to do this. These are my thank you cards from this week.
So you're showing us envelopes, 4 envelopes ready to go. Put them in the
Sorry,
mail.
I'll put them this way so you can't see their addresses. 4 envelopes ready to go with the stamps on them and everything that I'm going to walk down. I was in St. Louis for a speech. So these are the women who hired me. And then this is a woman on my podcast. How many people am I showing gratitude for every week? And in saying, I appreciate what you do for me. I appreciate that you're part of my network. I appreciate that you're helping me be me. So those are the things that I do to stay on top of my network.
So that checklist, is there a metric you're trying to reach each week, or is it just to track generally?
To me,
Like, are
it's
you
just a track. It's just to make sure that I'm staying true to myself and I'm staying true to the tips that I tell people that they have to do. You have to meet new people. You have to have face to faces. You have to thank people for what they do for you. You have to reach out to people you haven't talked to in a while. Like I'm just trying to keep myself in check because I don't want to be do as I say, not as I do kind of person.
Yeah, no, it is true that sometimes, the cobbler's kids have no shoes kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
I can fix anyone else's business
yeah.
development plan,
Yeah. It's like,
but
don't look
sometimes
at
you
the man behind the curtain. Don't
yeah,
watch what I'm doing. Just do what I tell you to do.
yeah. So you had just shown us some physical cards a moment ago, and you had, carefully drawn things and really sweet
Yep.
looking stamps. And I will say that I, for years, wanted to be the person who sent cards.
Mhm.
Like I would say like 10 years ago, that was sort of in my mind, the kind of person I wanted to be. And I kept not doing it, not doing it. I would buy cards. I had cards made with my name. My mother gave me stationery. Like it was, I had addresses and I had stamps. I don't like my penmanship. I can't think as well as I'm writing as neatly as I possibly
Yeah.
can. I now use an online system that does it for me. And
Okay.
it started where I was just looking for a way to gather addresses online. And it turned out that that place, which is postable.com,
Mhm.
sells cards, which isn't why I went to them initially. someone shared with me this address link and I thought that's clever. And so I was using their free address book and then one day was like, "Oh, I'm going to now use that to this."
Yeah.
So now I send cards and I send, welcome home cards when
Yep.
someone moves. I
Yep.
send, sympathy cards and condolence cards and get better cards and congratulation cards. And it's like all these things that are just so much easier to do when you have the right system in place. So
Mhm.
I think it's like if something doesn't work, try something slightly different.
Yes.
Your intentionality is to stay in touch.
Yeah.
And as you said, if you've got good content, there's sort of a mass way of doing that, like
Yep.
just newsletter and podcasts and social posts. But the one to one, and someone else might not want to make phone calls. Maybe they're going to send text messages to 3 people a week.
Yep.
Like, but just sort of about a attention with a follow through. Intention alone is not going to be good enough.
Right.
Your checklist, though, is very interesting because it is a way of you resetting every week so
Yep.
that you're doing it. You
Exactly.
can
I write
acknowledge it.
the date I write the date on, like, week of this week, and, like, so that if I get to Friday and I'm like, "Wow, I haven't done anything." There's also a spot at the bottom of my checklist that says thoughts on the week. So if I haven't done it, it could be like this, I was on a plane for 3 days this week. Like I didn't, that, so life happens. So just to keep me in check of myself, there is the thoughts on business development this week. And it could say this week was way too busy. This week I was sick. This week everybody had COVID. Like, I don't know, but there is that sort of caveat at the bottom if I don't get everything on my checklist done.
So I know I'm writing them down here for myself. One-to-ones, events, thank
I was
yous, follow up.
so it was so how many face to faces now
Yep.
prior to COVID it was face to face. Now it could be Zoom, like whatever.
Right.
So it was how many face to faces did I have or events did I attend?
Hmm.
How many new people did I meet? Like write down the names of the new people that I meet so you could put them in your database because we all know we need to have the database. And it was how many follow-up emails did I do for the people that I sent those follow-up emails to the people that I met, and how many thank you cards did I send? Because if somebody gave me a face to face or helped me do something, or somebody had a so like you said, it doesn't have to be a thank you. It could be a sympathy card. It could be a congratulations card. It can be like just sending you a card because I miss you card. Like, so how many
Right.
cards I send? And then at the bottom, it's thoughts on this business development thoughts on this week. What's working? What's not working? What did I miss? What was I too tired? Like anything,
Two
anything.
questions on this. One is, how long have you had that checklist?
I started that checklist when I first started my business. So for almost 7 years now, I've had that.
Wow. Okay. That's
And I
so.
keep a folder of them.
Yeah. So it works for you.
Yeah.
And how? So you said you're keeping a folder. Is it for a reason? Or are you going back?
I like to go back and be like, oh, I talked to this person on this day, or what. It's almost like a diary. It's almost like a business diary.
Uh huh. Interesting. And you mentioned database. Do you have a particular system, CRM,
Yeah,
spreadsheet?
I use Pipedrive. There's a lot of different there's Memorum, there's Pipedrive, there's HubSpot, there's a lot of my big clients use Cosential. So like there's so many out there. Like I
Mhm.
can't just because I use Pipedrive doesn't mean like that's the one I endorse. It's just the one that works for me right now.
Right.
Who my company is because I'm changing my company into 100% speaker, I might have to go with something like Speaker Flow or something. I might have to migrate my system.
Right.
The thing is you have to have somewhere where you're keeping all of your contacts and a record of how you've interacted with.
Hmm. Very cool. Hey, my favorite wrap up question. Here
Oh,
we go. So going to be a year from now. I know I'm going to see you, for instance, at the next
in
conference.
Orlando.
So it might even be a full year, but next summer I'll see you, and I'm
Mhm.
going to want to know all your updates. I want to know what we're going to be celebrating a year from now when I say, "Oh my gosh, Julie, it's been a little while. How have you
Yes.
been? What have you been up to? What are you most looking forward to in the year ahead?"
Well, something that you've already accomplished. I am applying for a TEDx talk. And my application is due December 16th. It's a whole application. You have to audition. You have to go to a boot camp. It's an intense process. If I get selected, I don't want to give the date because I don't want to. It would be in the spring that I would give this TEDx talk, and That is the one thing that I'm hoping I can accomplish in 2023. And then after that, if I accomplish that in the spring, then I would like to, in June, begin to write my second book.
Wow. Both amazing things. I
Yeah.
can't wait to celebrate both of them with you. Yes, the journey to a TEDx stage is often a more involved process. You sounds like you're in really good hands though. If they've got this kind of onboarding,
Yeah, and I have a
they'll
coach
support you.
too. Haley is my coach, so a lot of the people in NSA know her, so Haley
Mhm.
Foster, so
Very cool. And
working with
congratulations on just even putting it out there that you're ready to go for the second book. I'm in the middle of writing my third, and I don't love the writing process, but I like the results.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I'm excited. It's my book came out in June of 2020, so it's time. It's been by the time I start it in June, it'll have been 3 years, which
yeah.
probably is a little too long. Probably should have started earlier, but I got this whole TED thing that I'm doing, so
Very cool. Well, congratulations. We can't wait to celebrate all of that with you. How
thanks.
can people find you and follow your work?
Okay, sure. So I can be found you can go to my website, Julie Brown, B as in boy, D as in dog, juliebrownbd.com. You can find me on LinkedIn at the same thing, Julie Brown BD. Just let me know where you found me because I get a lot of requests and I don't accept requests from people who don't say where they found me. So those are the two main places. Or if you're into graphics, you can look for me on Instagram at Julie Brown underscore BD.
Fantastic. We'll put all the links in the show notes at ontheschmooze.com. Julie, thank you so much for joining us for this
Yeah.
conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Bye, everybody.